اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.
أعوذ بالله السميع العليم من الشيطان الرجيم. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. In the name of Allah, most merciful, ever merciful, and may God's peace and blessings be upon the holiest of all prophets, our beloved Prophet Muhammad, and the purified members of his household and progeny. And may God's peace and blessings be upon our beloved third Imam, Imam al-Hasani, as well as the companions and family members who gave up their lives with him on the dunes of Karbala. Obviously, the events of Karbala are full of substance, and they can be explored from a multitude of different aspects and dimensions and angles. And I trust that in the days and nights ahead, you will all, inshallah, get to listen to speeches that address various aspects of these events. The historical dimension, the biographical dimension, the spiritual dimension, the doctrinal dimension, and so on and so forth. And so because of that, I decided that for my modest contribution, I'll try to concentrate a little bit more on what may be considered a more applied approach to our understanding of the events of Karbala, so that when we look and when we study and we analyze the events of Karbala, we try to extrapolate, we try to understand from a practical point of view. We happen to be minority communities that live in the West. And there are realities, there are tensions that come with being a minority situation living in the West. When we look at ourselves, we happen to be a minority because of our language, because of our history, because of our beliefs, even because of our actions. At the belief level, no one else in society believes, for instance, that there is a 12th Imam who is present. Although we don't see him, he sees us and hears us and cares about us, and that he will reappear at the end of times to reestablish justice on earth. We're in a minority situation for believing that. We're also in a minority situation for praying 5 times a day, for fasting during the month of Ramadan, for performing Hajj, for our sisters, for wearing the hijab in these societies. This is all a minority situation. And with being a minority situation comes the reality of feeling the pressure of the majority, trying to understand, and naturally leading to some sort of assimilation and adaptation. So this is, from our perspective, our reality. Now if we go back to 14 centuries in the past, to the events of Karbala, one aspect of what was going on that battlefield, and because it is a battlefield, we see that there was a lot of courage, a lot of bravery that was demonstrated during those events. And this makes sense because we happen to be on a battlefield. There's a military confrontation going on, a physical confrontation between 2 armies. But there's also another battle going on. There's a psychological and an ideological battle going on during the events of Ashura and Karbala. So I decided to look at that event from the perspective of that battle ongoing between two sides that are in no way, shape or form equal. In other words, Imam al-Hussein, peace upon him, and his companions are in a minority situation, and they are confronted by a crushing majority. And yet, when we look at the events, we see that at no time in that event was there any weakness on the part of the companions of the Imam. There was never any hesitation. There was an unshakable conviction about the position in Imam Hussein alayhi salam's status as well as his companions. No one changed their mind at any time. And yet, naturally, when you're in a minority situation confronted to a huge majority, at some point there is usually some weakness. You let go of some things under the pressure of the majority. So what is it that enabled the companions of the Imam and the Imam himself to remain steadfast, solid in their belief, that they would not let go and change their position for any reason, even though they're in this tiny minority? If we go to the sermons and the sayings that we have from the events of Karbala, at some point there's a group of people who were trying to convince the Imam to change his mind. They came to the Imam and basically they told him, if only you would accept, we know that Yazid is not a good man, we know that he is ruining the religion, and he is ruining political life, and he is committing oppression and injustice. But at least if you would accept him as a head of state, then your life would be spared. There is no reason for battle. And the entire thing is simply not worth it for someone of your status and caliber to go on this sort of endeavor. And part of the answer of the Imam are these few words that carry a lot of meaning. Part of what the Imam replied was, وَمِثْلِي لَا يُبَايِعُ مِثْلَهُ. And the likes, my likes, or the likes of me, do not pay allegiance, do not accept as a head of state someone like Yazid. These words can be analyzed from all sorts of angles. One of them being that the Imam is basically talking about identity and duty. When the Imam says, my likes, someone like me, he's basically referring to an identity. The Imam knows who he is. And when he says, someone like me cannot pay allegiance, cannot accept someone like Yazid, the Imam is basically expressing a sense of duty. There is a responsibility that comes from that identity. I wanted to look at that very quickly in a few minutes and bring it back to our reality as a minority. Our reality as minorities looking for a sense of identity and to try to understand what is our duty based on that identity. So very quickly, in 3 points. The first one, oftentimes when someone is in a minority situation, you tend to exaggerate or over-dramatize the difficulty you're in. You tend to feel that you're the only one going through this sort of difficulty. When in reality, every single human being, at every single moment in their lives, is actually part of a minority. The only difference is that the spotlight is not on that aspect of their life. if you put enough people in a group and you look at that group, you'll have people who are taller and people who are shorter. You'll have people who eat different things, who speak different languages, who wear different clothes. Each one of these factors can be considered a minority. You can be a minority simply based on what you eat, on what you wear, on how you think, on your upbringing, the kind of family you came from. Each one of these can represent a minority. And the issue will not always be, the right answer is not always to aim to be like everybody else. It's okay to be different, it's okay not to fit in. No one is trying to stand out. But keep in mind that everybody, at every time in their lives, happens to be a part of a minority. That in and of itself is not enough. This is part of life. The second aspect, the second point about identities and duties is that if you live in a country like Canada, for instance, because you happen to be a minority, whether you're reading books or listening to the news or talking to people on the street, you will be questioned based on that minority status, especially when it has far-reaching implications like being a Muslim. So they'll basically ask you, are you a Muslim or are you a Canadian? And it's a big question. The problem is that it's based on false or a falsified logic. There is an assumption in that question that is wrong. Let's take, for example, you go to school, you happen to play on a team in that school, a sports team, and one of your friends at school asks you, are you my friend? Or are you a student? Or are you an athlete? What's the answer? Which one is it? Are they mutually exclusive in the sense that if you are one, you are not the other? But the question that you get, are you a Muslim or are you a Canadian, is based on the assumption that they're mutually exclusive, that you cannot be one and the other. You have to be one or the other. No human being is one thing. When someone asks you about your identity, you have to know where they're coming from. Each and every one of us is a son or a daughter to someone. A lot of us happen to be brothers and sisters to other people at the same time. You happen to be students, professionals, athletes, you belong to different communities in all sorts of ways. Each one of these is an identity. An identity is a compound, is a complex reality. It's not one thing. It's not monolithic. It's not one reality. It's multiple faces that put together constitute who you are. The last point is that when we understand the position of the Imam, when he says مِثْلِي لَا يُبَايِعُ مِثْلَهُ, it shows a very clear understanding of his identity. No one is born knowing what their identity is. It's an abstract notion. You need to think about it, and you need to educate yourself about it. You need to acquire the knowledge to understand what it means to be what you are. If you say, I'm Canadian, you need to understand what that means. The identity always comes with duties. The identity always comes with responsibilities. And you can't get to them, you can't understand them, until you understand that identity in detail. When you say, I'm a Muslim, you have to understand what that really means. The identity of being a Muslim, the identity of being a Shia. So here there's an additional layer that before you get to understanding your duty, you have to spend time educating yourself. And in the last few minutes I have, I'll mention very quickly an invocation, a dua that we have from our Imam, the 12th Imam, who is not only praying for us in that dua, he's also teaching us how to pray for each other in that dua. And he refers to knowledge, to 3 levels of knowledge that I think may be relevant for our topic. I'll start from the beginning because of the beauty of those words, and because it's a dua, and I hope that you pray with me while I recite the words until I get to the section that I'll translate in English. The Imam says, Allahumma arzuqna tawfiq al-ta'a wa bu'd al-ma'siyah wa sidq al-niyyah wa irfan al-hurmah وأكرمنا بالهدى والاستقامة وسدد ألسنتنا بالصواب والحكمة واملأ قلوبنا بالعلم والمعرفة وطهر بطوننا عن الحرام والشبهة واكفف أيدينا عن الظلم والسرقة واغضض أبصارنا عن الفجور والخيانة واكفف أسماعنا عن اللغو والغيبة. And then وتفضل على علمائنا بالزهد والنصيحة. Level 1 of knowledge. وتفضل على علمائنا بالزهد والنصيحة وعلى المتعلمين. Level 2 of knowledge بالجهد والرغبة. Level 3 of knowledge وعلى المستمعين بالاتباع والموعظة. The Imam starts by praying for the most important, the one that you're supposed to be, the one that you're supposed to aim for. The Imam says he's praying, he's imploring God to have the grace to grant the scholars of religion who spend their entire lives studying religion and explaining religion. They have books, they have lectures, they have websites. Try to make a program for yourself to connect with those scholars and to stay in tune regularly for yourself. The Imam says, and O God, grant those scholars the detachment from worldly things and to teach religion by giving good advice. تفضل على علمائنا بالزهد والنصيحة. Level 1. Level 2, المتبعين. ثالث وحدة المستمعين. صلوا على محمد وآل محمد. المتعلمين, those who study and learn religion, grant them the ability to struggle and put their energy in religion, الجهد, and then the desire and the curiosity and the interest to keep going. والرغبة. بالجهد والرغبة. This is level 2 of knowledge. You can be a scholar, try to be one. While you're getting there, you're a student of religion. And then finally, you can't have the time and the dedication to be formally studying religion, then maybe you can at least stay in that general circle, that general environment where you lend your ear to what's going on, what's being said from the scholars and the second level, the students of religion, so that at least you're included in the prayer of the Imam when he says, al-mustami'een, those who listen, and to those who listen, to heed or to listen, bil-ittiba'i wal-maw'idha, so that they obey what they hear and they listen to the good advice. That's the maw'idha. That's all the time I have for today. May God's peace and blessings be upon our Imam and the members of his household and the companions who sacrificed their lives so that this type of knowledge reaches us, and may God Peace and blessings be upon our Holy Prophet and upon you all. Wa sallallahu ala Muhammadin wa alihi al-tahirin.
اللهم صل على محمد وآل محمد.